Hi guys, today I'm going to talk about social change, which just happens to be one of my favorite all-time topics, okay? Because debates about change, you can't get enough about debates about change. I think they're the most relevant debates that you can have, and probably the debates that will affect you the most in the long term, because these are probably things that are happening in your society. And there's no better type of change than social change. In fact, if you put the word social in front of many other things, those things immediately become cooler. Think about it, right? Like social coffee, social marketing, social education, social driving, social mobility, social computing, social clothing, social videos. All of these things, social, makes things much more powerful. But we're going to focus on the concept of change, right? So within a society. And in this session, we will explore a few different approaches to change. Now, most debates that you will have are about a specific policy, a specific suggestion, doing something specific to effect change in a specific, I'm using the word specific a lot, but it's important to be specific, in a specific context. So it could say like, in country X, we are going to do policy Y in order to get outcome Z, right? Or Z, or whatever it is. Now, in those debates, we tend to be very focused on that specific policy, and you try to show whether or not the change will happen, will not happen. But in the end, what you're actually doing is you're arguing different approaches. There's no real way to know whether or not a specific policy is going to be successful, right? You don't have all the data, and you're not going to know whether you're going to do it. But what you can do is argue an approach, whether or not that approach is more appropriate for that problem, for that context, right? And this is how we apply philosophies. So at a very high level, abstract level, people will analyze the situation and say, like, based on the situation, I think you need to apply this philosophy. And other people, for every philosophy, there is an opposite philosophy. So others will look at that situation and say, no, I think you need to apply this opposite philosophy, right? And then the debate or the discussion becomes around those two competing philosophies. So even if you change the situation, you have the two same philosophies approaching each other. If you understand these philosophies, you will know what the counter philosophy is, obviously. You will also know the type of arguments that you can use under each philosophy, right? So that makes you, allows you to approach debates much better and compare and contrast those debates at the higher philosophy level, which is far more interesting. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to introduce you to this overall concept, and then we will look at a few different philosophies. Okay, so let's try to get into this with an example. So let's say we're talking about a family, which is the ultimate, social demographic, and that here is Papa, the father, who's wearing like a big hat, and then we have the mom in the family, and then we have like kids. So let's get a bunch of kids here. There's one particularly big kid and then one like small kid. Okay, so these are the kids in the family. So we want to create some kind of social change around this family. So let's say small kid, we're going to mark here, once has discovered vegetarianism, right? Kids before saw a video or a documentary about cows being slaughtered and then felt really painful and bad about that and had some kind of ethical awakening and wants to make all the other members in the family also become vegetarian, or at least spread that. So that is the social change. Okay, so that's the outcome. And with the debates about social change, you have to be very clear about what that outcome is. So if the outcome is make everyone vegetarian, right? That's one outcome. Or it could just be eat less meat. These are two different outcomes. One is more easily achievable. Yeah, this one, right? It's easier to say, I want to just reduce the meat consumption rather than make everyone vegetarian, which is you will only eat meat. But the impact of the lower bar is also less, right? So if you run a very principled case and you say it's always wrong, it's terribly bad, but I don't want to have total change, I just want to have a slight reduction, it makes it easier for you to achieve that, but it also makes your outcome less important, less valuable. Because you just went on this whole principle rant, and then now you're like, I don't think everybody needs to change. Okay, so you need to have some kind of consistency. You can take a principle approach, but don't sound all so righteous, and don't make it all about the principle, because then it's not going to match with your policy. Okay, but it's important to know what your goal or your power is, right? So let's say the goal here is to make everybody vegetarian, right? I'm going to keep that goal, just strike that out, makes my life easier, or we can try to get rid of it like this. Yeah, okay. Cleaner, it's a virtue, cleanliness. Okay, so let's say that's the goal. So what kind of approaches does Kid have to get change? So Kid can try changing everybody here one by one, working through his age group where Kid has most influence, and then eventually change the entire family, right? So this is bottom-up change, right? Change happening from the bottom to the top, right? So in every society, structured roughly like, a pyramid. The people at the bottom have the least political or economic power, so the people who are poorest, or so on and so forth, or not that engaged, involved in politics. And then as you move higher and higher up the hierarchy of power, the people at the top, the less people, but they have more power, right? So the bureaucrats, the politicians, the financial leaders, and these individuals at the top have the most amount of power, right? So if you want to do bottom-up change, you change the mass first. These are usually people you have most access to, and you could also be then in the middle, changing from the bottom and then slowly moving the change up to the top, and that is called bottom-up change. Okay, and there's some specific advantages, disadvantages that suit that, but it's also the context about where you think the change needs to start. The opposite of bottom-up change is, of course, top-down change. So let's say Kid goes directly to the father, appeals some kind of massive case. Well, it depends who the power broker is in the family. It could be the mom, right? So maybe it's the mom that controls everything. Go to the mom, then you get control. So you have debates about who is the better actor to push the change. Maybe it's mom changes dad, or mom changes everyone. Who knows? But basically, if you start at the top and then push the change downwards, that is top-down change, right? And this change tends to be faster. So if you have access right at the top, get the change there, then everybody at the bottom automatically has to follow that change. Unless, of course, there's resistance to authority, then maybe you won't get it. So again, this depends on the context, and we can apply and investigate these things in a lot more detail later, right? So that's one change philosophy, top-down versus bottom-up. They can also have another change philosophy, which is either radical or disruptive change versus incremental change, right? So that is, I put disruptive or radical, because this is quick, fast change versus incremental, right? So basically it is whether change is fast or change is slow. Change is sudden and breaks things, or change slowly takes time and changes slowly, almost imperceptibly, like you don't really know that change is happening, but it's happening. Okay, so our active Kid can take the same two different philosophies and apply them. He can try a disruptive change, just force everybody, right, to eat vegetarian. Just switch over today, right? It's done, it's finished. I'm going to go to the fridge, take everything that's meat, throw it away, put pictures of dying cows everywhere around the house, have kill my pet and say will you eat this? No, so that's radical disruptive change. It has a huge shock value. It changes very quickly. So if your problem is very urgent, you need something that is disruptive. Also, if the problem becomes structural and is ingrained in part of society, then maybe you need something to break it. You need a bit of a shock treatment, right? Disruptive change can happen top down. Disruptive change can also happen bottom up, right? So these things are not mutually exclusive. Or the change can be incremental. So you do things slowly. So maybe once a week you're vegetarian, and then twice a week you're vegetarian, or once a meal you're vegetarian, and then slowly, after a while people just get used to it. Hey, this thing's not so bad, and then eventually, suddenly everybody's changed. But it takes longer. So it's a much smoother process, and people don't really realize that it's happening, but it takes a long time. Right? And you may get resistance, and people don't really want to go along with that. Think of things like educational campaigns, social awareness campaigns. All these things are incremental, slow, long-term change. But eventually you change what is a norm in that community or in that society, and then everybody changes, right? Excuse me, something wrong with my throat today. The third type of change we will explore in this session, the collection of social change, is inclusive versus exclusive change. So inclusive versus exclusive. And the difference is whether or not you involve or you separate, right? So inclusive change means including other people as part of it. And that change tries to happen through engagement and awareness, right? So kid has joint meals with other people, shares stuff, and creates awareness through engagement. That's inclusive change. Or exclusive change is that you want to create some separation, and you think that separation is important to build a strength, to protect that group, right? So that that group or those actors who need to change can change separated from other people. And this, so for example, kid, running out of colors here, we'll use green. Kid has these two people, and they have like an exclusive vegetarian club. They eat differently, they do stuff differently, right? And then so that they can build on their vegetarian principles with each other. Because if you join everybody else, it becomes hard. There's meat temptation, and they may end up losing their will to continue. But if they've developed that strength, then they become stronger vegetarians. Of course, this means now that they're excluding themselves from the rest. And there's a price to pay. Okay, so maybe the rest are not going to like them much. They're going to say like, you guys are different, you've excluded yourself, you've fallen away from society. But they become stronger within their own principles. And then later, they can join society again and say, hey guys, we're back, except we're vegetarian now. And you can be vegetarian too. Or whatever it is that you want to be, right? Or engage probably at some other time, but during meal times, you're fully isolated. It'll be clearer when we go through these things later, right? But debates, for example, about like private ethnic schools or religious schools, where kids are separated from the rest of society, or political parties that are mono-ethnic, right, for one ethnicity only, are debates about whether or not change should be exclusive or change should be inclusive, okay? And like all of these other things, it's not mutually exclusive, and it can have its pros and cons, right? So, I hope this overall picture is kind of clear. The goal is, how do you make everyone vegetarian? And there are many different ways that you can do that. You can try to do the change from top to bottom. You can do the change from bottom to up. You can do it incrementally or radically, or you can do it by including everyone or excluding some people, okay? And you can partner and pair some of these things too. Now, the question is, which one is more successful? What does that depend on? Is it like, if it's vegetarianism, I should do top-down change. If it's socialism, I should do inside-outside change. Whatever it is. Is that what determines the change? No, it's not. What determines what really works is your context, right? It's your situation. How best that situation suits the change, or the change suits the situation. Now, it should be change suits the situation. You analyze the situation and you say like, okay, based on this family, it's very kind of hierarchical. So the best approach is to go top down, right? I need to go to the top and then I work things down. And there's a lot of consistency, and the people at the top are very open to engagement and discussion. Talk to them, change is going to happen, no problemo, okay? But like in a debate, people are going to disagree about that context. You are going to say that, no, all the minorities in the country disagree. The other side will say, no, they have some kind of consistency. The other people will say, no, this is the actual problem. The other side will say, no, this is the actual problem. So what it actually comes down to is who has a better grasp on the problem, who can better paint a more suitable problem for their philosophy. Because you can't choose your philosophy as much, right? You have the policy kind of dictates your philosophy, but you use the philosophy, these terms, to make it really clear. And then from there, you need to contextualize your problem. If you can make your problem suit your philosophy, your solution, then it's more likely that you will end up winning the debate, right? So the most important thing is how you discuss your context and how you make your context fit your philosophy. Talk about how that change exactly is going to happen and talk about very specific details. So we'll get into more details later, but I wanna show you just very briefly the distinction between the philosophy and the change by looking at another example. Okay, so if you look in your books, you'll have this table. Wow, it just fits in there. And what I've tried to do here is separate the problem, the policy, the approach, and the philosophy, right? So what we've been talking about is stuff here, the philosophy, okay? And my contention is that this is the important stuff. You ignore the other stuff, okay? Don't worry about that too much, but this is the important stuff, because if you master this, and if you know what arguments best suit top-down, what rebuttals best suit, you know, bottom-up or incremental and so on and so forth, then these things will fit to many different debates, right? You can just apply, you look at a debate and you know this is top-down incremental change. And then I can just dig up all the arguments I need and plug it into this debate, okay? So I'm going to show you how it is separated from the problem. Let me clear that first. So what is the problem you want to solve? And again, debates about change, you need to be very clear about the problem, right? So in this scenario, simulation, I've highlighted two problems. So there's a discrimination against ethnic minorities in societies, or in this society, let's call them the blues, right? And these ethnic minorities are unable to gain employment in civil service due to poor connections. I've highlighted the poor connection stuff there. That's what I'm characterizing as the problem. On a broad level, it just may be the ethnic minorities have trouble getting employment in civil service, but I'm going to emphasize and say that's because of poor connections. Okay, so let's say these ethnic minorities, the blues, we'll call them the blues. Okay, so this is the problem. What are the potential policies that we can use to solve the problem? I've proposed 4 policies. The first one is to hire more ethnic minorities in government positions. So this directly solves, right, problem number 2. The second one, form a special ministry just for the blues, okay? Only the blues have this ministry to solve this problem. The third one, have a special curriculum in schools. Teach people about blues, how blues are good people, do engagement with blues. There's no problem. Everybody then eventually starts to like the blues. Fourthly, have a social media campaign against racism, against this bluism, right? And actors or actresses or celebrities will come out, some of them who are blues themselves, or half blues or partial blues. Everybody has a little bit of blue in them, right? And say that blues are okay. And then eventually that changes people's minds against blues, and then they will change, right? So those are the other 4 policies. So let's look at each approach. So the first one about directly hiring them. This is some kind of affirmative action policy. Will directly solve this problem, okay? And indirectly in the long term, change problem about social discrimination. At least that's what I'm going to say. So this is top-down change, right? Because I am directly hiring them, and then I'm hoping that after that, change will start to trickle down in terms of changing people's perceptions. This is disruptive, because I'm going to force them into that position. So it may be disruptive to them, disruptive to people who work in government. And it's inclusive, because I am pushing blues into the system, right? I'm making them part of everybody else, okay? So this is top-down disruptive change. The opposite of this is bottom-up, inclusive, and incremental change, right? So to be opposite of this, I will say that you need to have change from the bottom, and that change needs to be slow. If you do change from the top, it will create too much discomfort, right? It will upset people. So we need to have slow change, and that change is more sustainable. Okay, so you see how I can contrast this with the other one. Let's look at the second one. If I form a special ministry with only blues in it, this is also top down because I'm forming a ministry at government, but it's exclusive. Okay, I'm not including mixing people. I'm saying you only need to be together. I'm separating them from others, because then I'm going to make the argument that this helps develop their strength and their confidence, and they can build better policies and help everybody else from this special ministry, right? So it's top down Exclusive, there are only groups of 1 people. And incremental, that change takes a long time, right? What about the special curriculum thing? Is that top down or bottom up? It's bottom up because I've written it here. It's inclusive and incremental. And finally, having a social media campaign is exactly the same as this. It's bottom up, inclusive, incremental. Okay? So there's the difference between the policy and the philosophy. And the philosophy is more important. So if you, let's say, ignore this part, don't look at it, right? And if you have this problem and you think about, based on this problem and the context, right? If I know the situation of blues and their community and the society, which one of these philosophies will best suit this context? And then based on these philosophies, I choose a policy, right? Or I think about how to best fit the policy. You see what I mean? Okay. Now, what you should try to do in order to detach your policy and philosophy is randomly change one of these things and see if you can come up with philosophies. Pick any problem, pick a few different philosophies. Say, I'm going to do something bottom up, inclusive, incremental, and see what you can think about that will change it. And then change one factor. So instead of bottom up, inclusive, incremental, it's bottom up, inclusive, radical, right? What changes? Or top down, inclusive, incremental. What changes, right? And then that will help you separate the policy and the philosophy, and then start using these phrases and these terms in debates, and you will be able to come up with a lot more arguments and prove to your judge and your audience members, and of course the rest of the world, that this is a debate about not the specific stuff, but about which competing philosophy is better. And because of the context, because of the problem, our philosophy and our approach of top-down, of incremental, bottom-up change is the best approach to achieve the right kind of social change in this debate.